Hey, family, welcome back to the So Lux Life Podcast, where we talk faith, life, healing, growth, and becoming the best version of yourself that God already sees. I'm your host, Krispin, and today we're diving into something that is absolutely vital in this season, which is protecting your peace. Because if the enemy can't destroy you, he'll try to distract you. And distraction is the silent killer of destiny. So let's just get right into it. So let's first talk about what peace really is. Peace is not the absence of problems, it's the presence of God while you're in the storm, right? Jesus said in John 14:27, "Peace I leave with you, my peace I give you. Let not your heart be troubled, neither let it be afraid." This means that peace is a gift, but it's also something that we must guard. Peace is spiritual real estate, really, and not everyone deserves access to that property, if that makes sense. You know how you protect your home. You don't just give your address out to strangers. You don't just let anyone come into your home. That is what you need to do when it comes to your peace. You don't need to give everyone access to you. You don't need to let everyone in. You don't need to take to heart everything that people say to you and let it affect you past that conversation. So protecting your peace does require discernment. Some people come with assignments and some people come with attachments. When you don't discern the difference, your peace becomes the price that you will pay. Romans 12:2 tells us to renew our minds because peace is first lost in the mind before it's ever lost in the environment. And that's why when the enemy attacks your thoughts, your energy, and your emotions, he wants you to get overwhelmed to the point where you quit. He wants you to get overwhelmed to the point where you're stressed out. You're having these anxious thoughts. You're having, thoughts that you want to take yourself out of here. But peace says, I may not control what happens around me, but I control how I respond to it. I can control what actually gets inside of me. And there are pretty practical ways to protect your peace. The first one is limit access. Not everyone should have a front row seat to your life. You are the author of what you put out there, and you hold the key to the door that opens up what flows into your mind, what flows into your spirit, what flows into your energy. And some people are spiritual liabilities. They're constantly withdrawing from you. They're withdrawing, but they're never depositing anything positive in your life. So protect your peace by one, setting those boundaries without apologizing for it. Sometimes we feel like we owe people answers, or we owe people explanations, and we're scared to tell people no, but you have to protect you, your mind, your spirit, your soul before anything else. Stop over explaining yourself. If God gave you the instruction, you don't owe anyone an explanation. Your peace is too expensive to spend on convincing people who are committed to misunderstanding you. Have you ever just experience someone, and every single time you talk to them is something like they're very combative. They always want to go back and forth with you, even about the smallest things. Like, those people are committed to misunderstanding you. And with that, you have to detox yourself emotionally. Sometimes protecting your peace does mean walking away from conversations, environments, relationships that drain you, jobs that drain you, and it could be your family. And I know a lot of people have this problem. They don't want to detox from their family, but you have to. You have to know that you are your own person. Everyone is living their own life once they are grown. So you have to make the executive decision to say, hey, I'm not putting up with that, or hey, I'm not letting that slide, or just do whatever you have to do to protect your peace. In Proverbs, it says that you have to guard your heart with all diligence, for out of it flows the issues of life. Your heart is the filter to your destiny, so you for sure need to protect it. Another way to protect your peace is to slow down and find rest and really just quiet that noise. Peace is often found in the quiet spaces, in the pauses of life. Jesus himself rested. He withdrew from the crowds. He fasted 40 days, 40 nights, got away from everybody. He took time to recharge. Rest is not laziness. And sometimes when we are building businesses, when we're working, we feel like we can't rest without guilt tripping ourselves about it. You're not being lazy. It's just spiritual warfare. Is putting on your armor and protecting your mental so you can show up as the best person possible to other people. And you have to pray for peace. I pray for everything in life, and peace is one of those things that I feel like you really have to pray for. You can't protect what you don't invite in. So ask the Holy Spirit for peace in your home, in your mind, in your decisions, in your relationships, in your finances. You have to literally pray and ask God for what you want him to provide. So if you're struggling with being overwhelmed, if you're struggling with being a people pleaser, if you're struggling with, I don't know, whatever it is you're struggling with, you just need to let it go, give it to God, and ask him to give you peace on that situation. So what are some signs that your peace is under attack? One, you start feeling overwhelmed for no reason, like nothing in your life has changed. Your workload has not gotten any heavier, but for some reason you just start feeling overwhelmed all the time. You're not at peace. You get irritated quickly. You're not at peace. You're constantly replaying conversations in your head that have ended, letting them affect you after the fact. You're not at peace. You're feeling anxious. You're feeling unfocused. You're constantly feeling attacked. You're not at peace. And you're slowly losing joy in the things that you normally enjoy, right? So these are not random feelings. These are all indicators that your peace is under attack. And when your peace is under attack, that means your purpose is coming up next, right? So with that, protecting your peace is also protecting your purpose. You can't operate, you can't create, you can't parent, you can't lead, you can't build in a space where you're not at peace, where you're constantly overwhelmed, where you're constantly distracted, and the enemy knows that, right? That's why he sends distractions disguised as opportunities. He sends distractions disguised as relationships, people disguised as those that support you, but they're really around just to have that access to you. Chaos disguised as urgency. But in this season, we're going to speak it because we're all going to move differently, right? We're stepping into a place where our peace is a priority and no longer an option. I'm saying that again. Your peace is a priority. It is no longer an option. And this is where you have to really hone in on your discernment and make sure your discernment is sharp and not compromised, and set those boundaries. It is okay, like I said, to say no if it is a matter that is going to compromise your peace, right? So hear me clearly when I say this. You do not have to attend every argument that you are invited to. And I've just really come to a space in my life where I'm not explaining myself to people anymore. If you are committed to misunderstanding me, if you are committed to arguing with me, if you are committed to bullying me, if you are committed to making these slick comments towards me, I'm no longer entertaining it. And I want you guys to no longer entertain that stuff in your life either, because you have so much purpose. There is so much that is out there for you. And the one thing that the devil will do will try to play in your mind. His whole purpose is to kill, steal, and destroy. He is the author of confusion, and confusion will compromise your peace more than anything. Have you ever just felt unsettled, or you're just not sure about the situation? You're walking on eggshells around a person, baby, get out of there. We are living in peace. If you are in a marriage and you're uneasy, you're unsettled about it, I'm not encouraging you to leave. But at the same time, maybe you guys need to seek some counseling, seek some therapy, because peace is the most important thing. The worst thing you can do to a child is raise them in an environment where it's not peaceful, where it's constant chaos. Y'all are arguing around the kids. Y'all are cussing each other out. You yelling and cussing at your kids all the time. You're not creating a peaceful environment to them. So what does that do? They go to school, they're distracted, they're worried about honestly probably not wanting to go home to y'all's BS because kids need peace. And I read a study the other day. It said that kids suffer from the same level of PTSD that people do in the army when they are raised in a household where it's constant fighting and arguing. And you don't want to do that, right? So again, we are not accepting invitations to every argument that we are invited to. You don't have to respond to every attack because at the end of the day, if you know the truth, that's all that matters. If you and God know the truth, that's all that matters. You don't have to go around explaining yourself. You don't have to go around trying to prove a point to anyone. You don't have to go around trying to get the last word. It's never that deep. You don't have to try to fix every situation. If someone is committed to having problems with you, let them go. Sometimes the most spiritual thing you can do is say no. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is walk away. And sometimes the holiest thing that you can do is protect your peace, right? Because God is writing every chapter in your life. And that requires you to have a clear mind, that requires you to have emotional stability and spiritual alignment. And it's so easy to get unaligned when our peace is compromised, you know? So just don't be afraid to let it go. Put your peace over anything that is trying to distract you from your purpose. So, um, any questions? I'm reading the comments here now. Somebody said, am I AI? No, man. I'm a full grown 34-year-old woman with 35. 35. Um but yeah, someone in the comments said therapy has done nothing but ruined relationships. I can't really speak on that one because I've gone to therapy after a divorce, but not while in an active relationship. So I honestly can't speak on that. But I appreciate you guys tuning in to the So Lux Life podcast as always. If you are just now tuning in as I'm wrapping up, make sure you guys go listen on Apple, Spotify, wherever you stream your podcast from. I will be dropping episodes weekly. I'm committed to being more consistent, you guys. But I love you. If you have any topics that you guys want me to discuss in the future, make sure you let me know. Bye.